Hey humans, welcome back to the second channel. This is the Scary Story channel where I read stories from you guys. Directions for submitting your own personal story are always down below. If you have a story of your own that you would like for me to read for a video and live react to, I do skim them in order to pick out which ones so that, just making sure that I can read them and that they have some sort of interesting story to them. But other than that, I mostly live react to them on here, which I think is really fun. So, okay, let's get right into it. Story 1. Hi, Hannah. Huge fan of your videos. I got a story that isn't mine, but my dad's. For some context, I am absolutely obsessed with Mothman and actually live in Ohio, where Point Pleasant, West Virginia is not that far of a drive. For those who don't know, Mothman is a cryptid that has frequently made appearances in Point Pleasant, usually following a tragic event. Its first appearance was exactly a month before the Silver Bridge collapse in 1967. I do know a little bit about Mothman. I did know he was a cryptid, and I do appreciate the backstory for our listeners. The only thing I really know is like my favorite murder when they had I think it was a mini episode that talked about it, but I don't know like all the details about it. So I'm very interested. My dad is somewhat of a skeptic, but is still open to the idea of the paranormal, cryptids, what have you. I imagine years ago, until this specific event happened, he would have laughed at the idea of a ghost. So this happened sometime in the 90s, I believe 96, a year before my sister was born and 5 years before I was born. My dad and a friend of his were heading home from Point Pleasant after a trip, and it was late at night. They were crammed into my dad's dinky little Toyota truck on some back road, and they both suddenly see a figure appear in the road ahead of them. My dad swerved to avoid it and even stopped to see what it was, but it seemingly vanished. He described it as a tall, dark figure with wings and red eyes, and his friends saw the exact same thing. The crazy thing is, neither of them knew about Mothman before this. Years later, in 2002, after he married my mom and had me and my sister, the Mothman Prophecies movie came out. Only then did he realize that he saw exactly what the movie was describing, down to every little detail. The only thing that I haven't found out yet was whether something bad happened after he saw it in 96. My sister was born a year later, though, so LMAO, just joking. I love her. Mean. Anyway, that's my story. He didn't tell me until sort of recently, but I've been obsessed with Mothman for a long time. I've got some merch I bought at the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant, which my dad and I like to visit every so often. I also have a Mothman onesie on as I'm typing this because it's Halloween, of course. People might view it as an evil cryptid, but I see a pretty positive light around it. Thank you for reading this. If you do, I hope you have an amazing day and great Halloween. Best, Allie. Thank you, Allie. And that tells you how far behind I am on my stories because you sent this around Halloween. But still, better late than never. We're getting through them. I love that story. I always think it's really interesting when other people see it as well, when there's more than one person there and they kind of corroborate the story, unless your dad and his friends are big jokers and kind of came up with this story and they decided they're going to stick to it. I wonder if anybody's caught like pictures of Mothman or something. I doubt it. I doubt any real photos, especially if it vanishes so quickly, allegedly. Okay, let's move on to story number 2. Hi, Hannah. I am such a huge fan of your channel, and I have been loving your scary stories from viewers. You always brighten my day, and it makes me so happy to see an awesome female creator in the horror sphere. If you choose to read this story, I ask if you could just refer to me by my first name, Courtney. That would be great, of course. And thank you so much. You guys are, I say this every video, but you guys are so sweet. My story is partially my own, but requires a bit of backstory that did not happen to me. I am a graphic designer and I frequently work with a local university's museum. The museum has a rotating exhibit that is curated by a professor at the university. Shortly after I graduated college, I was brought on to design my first exhibit with them, and it was on artifacts from South America and Mexico that highlighted the relationship between indigenous religions and Catholicism. I am a huge fan of Catholic imagery and was an art minor with a focus on European medieval art, so I was overjoyed to work with these artifacts and learn about a facet of religion that I did not know much about. The artifacts were all sourced from South America by a professor who worked closely with local artisans and historians and ranged from carved crucifixes to full-body statues of saints. Without a doubt, the heart of the exhibit was the Maximone statue. Maximone is I'm going to butcher this, Guatemalan. No, I'm not. I just didn't recognize the word for a second. Maximone is a Guatemalan folk saint who the Mayans began worshiping around the time of the Spanish conquests. He is a neutral figure, though he is considered a trickster. The professor explained to me and the museum director that he was considered a last resort. If praying to Jesus or Mary didn't work, it was time to go to Maximon. But don't dare go without offering alcohol or something similar. The statues were built with articulated arms and legs so they could theoretically come to life and take revenge on you if you did not treat them with respect and reverence. This specific statue had been on display in a dry religious school in the past. Hi, Winnie. You guys could never see her. I'm so sorry. I know some people want to see her, but she's just out of frame. She's camera shy sometimes. This specific statue had been on display in a dry religious school in the past, and he was given soda as an offering. That night, a custodian came in and saw the soda and removed it from the case, thinking it was a danger to the artifact. The next day, when the director of that museum came into work, campus police were all over the place. They explained to her that they had received consistent security alerts throughout the night, concentrated only on the case Maximone was resting in. The director slipped Maximone some alcohol and the security cameras never went off again. Now my experience with the trickster. I had come to meet with the museum director and the professor to discuss graphics for the exhibit. At this point, most artifacts were laid out, but we were still constructing a few glass cases. Maximone was displayed outside of the case, seated on a small chair in the back corner of the exhibit hall. The museum director and his graduate students were frustrated because they had been looking for a missing piece of a glass case for the entire morning. They claimed they had looked up and down and could not find it. The professor and I exchanged a confused glance, and he pointed up to the glass case behind the director. The missing piece was there in plain view. The color drained from the director's face, and he insisted it had not been there when they had checked moments before the professor and I arrived. The students backed up his claim, and they all looked horrified. I have known the director for almost 5 years now, and I am confident that he was telling the truth, as it is not in his nature to pull a prank like that. Everyone but the professor was freaked out, and he lived with Maximone in his house for years at this point, so it was an expected act of trickery in his opinion. Going forward, I made sure to stock Maximone up on tequila, and I personally never witnessed any other tricks from him for the remainder of the exhibit. I personally don't find Maximone scary, rather a compelling figure that likes to have a bit of fun. I've attached an example image of a Maximone statue, as I prefer not to share the image of the one I interacted with without consulting him first. Thanks so much, Courtney. Thank you, Courtney. Okay, I'm looking at the picture in my email. I'll have Taylor put the picture right here. What a cool looking statue. I love him. He looks like this one. I know this is not the same one, but he looks like he's covered in like ties and like beautiful fabric and stuff. And I wonder if those are offerings. And sure enough, he has alcohol around him. He has some money stuffed in here too, which I'm guessing also is an offering, and a candle on top. Oh, he's cool. That's so cool. I love that. If I had to deal with a haunted object, I would really hope it would just be kind of a prankster, trickster like this one, and neutral. Like not so sweet that they're boring, but also not evil, of course, would not be ideal. But I do love the idea of just like pulling little pranks and being like, give me my tequila. I need it. So that's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing. I love, like, that's such a cool, different, like, also cultural story. The only other experience I have with this kind of thing is when I went to the, what is it called? Zach Baggins Haunted Museum in Las Vegas with Mickey. We talked about it on a podcast episode. We talked about how all our issues with the museum and how it was kind of, yeah, that's a whole story. If you want to listen to the podcast episode, we go in depth about it. But the Dubuque box was there, like the infamous haunted Dubuque box. A lot of people wouldn't even go in to see the box, even though it was surrounded with like all the superstitious things, you know, in a locked case and had sand like around it and everything. And then if you go in, you were supposed to give it a token. It had a shrine on the wall on the side, and if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. And everybody would put either $1 or jewelry or just like a small tidbit. And it's really interesting because no one ever removes anything there. There was a giant pile of stuff. Nobody ever removes it because superstition. Like, even if I'm like really skeptical, I wouldn't take supposedly haunted objects giving pile. Like, I wouldn't take anything from it. By the way, I went in and saw the Dubuque box and I did not offer it anything and nothing happened. I never had any issues. But it's just interesting how superstitious people get and how much they feel like, you know, it doesn't hurt to just offer something anyway, right? Which I totally get. But again, that's different because the Dubuque box is debated. I don't think the Dubuque box in particular is haunted. I think Zach Baggins dramatizes. There's no evidence behind it. It's just made up stories that people say they saw it on eBay and this person came up with. It's like people coming up with backstories behind it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. This seems like there was actually something that happened, and I don't know. I love haunted objects are really fascinating to me. So thank you so much. Okay, so got kind of on a tangent there. Let's move on. All right, this next story says, "Hi there, Hannah. Before I start, I'd like to remain anonymous for safety reasons because the people who run that program are really serious about silencing victims. Sorry if this runs long, but I think it will be worth your time. I apologize if you have to censor any of it, but it's okay, and I totally get it if you need to edit any of the language or content because I understand how hard YouTube can be on creators. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and if I have to censor some stuff, I will. Usually it's okay for these videos because it's just a story and there's nothing graphic that goes along with it. But if I do, I will. Thank you so much. For background, when I was 16, I was sent to a troubled teen wilderness therapy program in the desert foothills of Idaho. I'm going to stop right here. I haven't read ahead on this story, but I know that anything that has to do with troubled teen wilderness camps, there's going to be child abuse, there's going to be neglect, there's going to be harsh conditions and stuff like that. So I just want to give a big trigger warning right now for all of the things. Most likely at least abuse, if not sometimes SA is involved in these stories and stuff. So just a big blanket trigger warning for everybody that if you're kind of sensitive or going through something like this right now, maybe this isn't the best story for you to listen to. So, okay, with that being said, let's go on. If you are involved in troubled teen awareness, you probably already know the one I'm talking about since there's only one in the region. My family was lied to about the nature of this place, and they were told it would be a nature retreat that would help with my severe depression, but instead it was an abusive place more meant for delinquents and teen drug addicts. I am not discounting or minimizing what you went through whatsoever. I can tell already that you've been through some stuff, like I already know but it's just all these stories start the same with like the family was told it was one thing, that it's going to help their kid, and then it's always another thing. Oh, okay. I was sent in the dead of winter where the average temperature was -9 degrees Fahrenheit and there was no permanent structures to keep us warm. Just a bonfire we had to tend to all hours and pup tents. All of us girls were starving and suffering from varying degrees of hypothermia. There were no showers, there was no medical care, and there was no comfort. We were physically and emotionally abused by our counselors, and frankly, I don't want to talk about what they would do to us. Basically, whatever you think sadistic men could do to harm a teenage girl, they did at least once to at least one of us. I'm so sorry. I knew exactly where this story was. Those wilderness camps are so effed up. None of them are, Ugh, very against them. The daily one was strip searching us while we were slowly freezing to death. Every other week, we were forced to pack our camps and backpack 10 to 20 miles to our next location in frozen desert foothills to set up camp again. This is where the paranormal aspect comes in. Oh, interesting. I didn't know this was going to go to a paranormal place. The program was set up on 70 square miles of public land in an area that was once Native American land that was considered haunted by the natives. Those hills were more than eerie. About half of us girls during our 3 to 4 months saw the same beings, which we called the sage people. When I first arrived, they asked if I'd seen them yet. I told them I didn't know what they were talking about, and they said, "Don't worry, when you see them, you'll know." There were no toilets, so when we needed to relieve ourselves, we had to go back into the frozen sagebrush 100 yards from camp to do our business. One dead cold night, I went out to urinate and I was walking back to the fire and saw it. It was a tall shadow with a white face and 2 holes for eyes. It wasn't menacing, it was just watching me. I must have looked pale as a ghost, and when I made it back to the other girls, shot up and said, "You saw it, didn't you? Now you know we weren't trying to scare you." They asked me what it looked like, and when I described it, the girl that had been there the longest pulled out her dirty notebook with an exact drawing she had done of it. That actually scared me more than seeing it. I could process going insane easier than knowing about 6 others had seen it too. That's really all I have to say about the sage people, but I might add that we all kind of got the feeling that they were there to protect us, or at least to acknowledge our suffering. I'm a skeptic, and I would chalk this up to a mass psychogenic illness. I'll be honest, I didn't want to gaslight you, but that's what I was thinking, was maybe because you were in such harsh conditions that maybe you guys were coping, this was a coping mechanisms that your brain was kind of seeing, except for the fact that she had drawn that thing months before I saw it and asked me to describe it before she showed me her drawing along with others that really saw it. Our abusers never saw it, and not every girl saw them either. In a weird way, I think some of the girls were jealous that they didn't see them. Us girls that were chosen by them to be seen referred to ourselves as the children of the sage. That is a really haunting story. I'm going to say this, but again, I just hope you know I have absolutely no ill intentions when I suggest this, but usually people write their stories in to know what I personally think. And so to honor that, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I think, but I don't want to come off like I'm gaslighting you, because I definitely believe that you guys saw these things. But may I offer an alternative explanation that what if it was the counselors that were doing this as a form of abuse? What if they were dressing up in outfits and doing this either to A, horrifyingly watch you go to the bathroom and you think that it was just a ghost, or B, literally just dressing up in costumes and then sneaking around like this in order to make you guys feel crazy? I know that's really sick thought, and that would not be your fault. And what if you saw something like that? What if they were doing this just to make you guys feel like you weren't in your right minds so that you wouldn't know what was going on? For how horrible those places are, I could see that being a thing. I don't know all the details, of course. Perhaps you didn't say this in your story, but perhaps all the counselors were present at the time when this happened. There was nobody missing, and therefore it had to be another entity. But that's just where my earthly skeptical brain goes, is that you really, of course, saw what you saw, but that it was just more forms of abuse that they were inflicting on you in this nature retreat. Either way, I am so sorry, genuinely so sorry that you went through this, because I have never heard one good thing about these camps, and everybody who goes through it comes out on the other side way worse off and more depressed and scared and sad than they were, and they need to be shut down, and it's a sick legal abuse ring. It's absolutely disgusting. And I think the counselors use it to do whatever they want and to abuse and I'm sure harm you in other ways just because they can, because they get, it makes me so mad. Regardless, I'm just so sorry. I'm just so sorry. Okay, let's move on to story 4. Hi, Hannah. I've been watching your videos for a few months and love your content. I wanted to share my story with you because I still can't explain what happened and I would love your opinion. This happened a few years ago, back in either late 2008 or not 2008, either late 2018, big difference, or early 2019. I was in college and one of my friends asked if I would drive her to pick up her car from getting maintenance. It was probably around 8 p.m. and we were just going down the road to AutoZone or something similar. Anyway, we got into the car and one of my other friends joined us. We are driving down the road and I see police lights behind us and I pull over to the side of the road. I honestly thought the police car was responding to a call and would drive by, so you can imagine my shock when the police car stopped behind me and another car. Remember this other car behind me. Yeek. Nothing to shoot your anxiety up, like feeling like you're not doing anything wrong and then the police suddenly stop you and you're just like, oh my God, what did I do? My friends and I are freaking out because we don't understand why we're being pulled over. I knew I wasn't speeding because I was looking for the turn into the car place. The cop goes up to the car behind me first and motions to my car with his flashlight. Then he walked to my car. This interaction took about 30 seconds to 1 minute. When he comes up to my car, he starts shining his flashlight into my face and into my car. He asks why I pulled over, which I thought was weird. That's super weird. They'd be mad at you if you didn't pull over. You can't win. And I told him it was because I saw the emergency lights. He says okay, and then just shines the flashlight around my car for another minute or so. He asks me a few more questions about what we're doing, where we're going, etc. I remember looking into his face, and his eyes were super bloodshot. Even thinking about them now gives me chills. Something was not right. Finally, he walks away and goes back to the car behind me. He never asked for my license or registration, which is typically the first thing cops do when you're pulled over. Yeah, huge red flag if they're not asking for that. That is basic protocol. That's really sketchy. If a police pulls you over, they're going to run your plates. He motions for the car behind me to leave, and I pull back onto the road as well. He never talked to the car behind me for an extended amount of time like he did me. Worst of all, after I pulled onto the road, the car behind me followed me closely for several miles until I pulled into the car shop. What the hell? My friends and I were super shaken and called our parents to tell them. My mom suggested that maybe there was a bulletin out for a car similar to mine. That's a good point. That seems likely, except for the fact that the cop never ran my license or registration or even my plate number, from what I understand, because he wouldn't have had enough time from when he left my car to when he pulled onto the road. Yeah, and he wouldn't have let you go if he was pulling your registration. He wouldn't have done a background on your car and checked your plates and let you just go ahead before he checked to make sure everything was good. So that doesn't make any sense. I honestly don't know what to make of this. I have unfortunately been pulled over since then, and the cop announced himself, gave the department name, and asked for my license and registration before doing anything else. Yes, exactly. I keep thinking about the cop's eyes and how off they looked. My friends and I looked at the police department website and Facebook page and couldn't find anyone who resembled him. I'm honestly scared that we were almost trafficked that night, especially since the other car followed us for a while on a multi-lane road. Thanks again for reading my story, and I hope to hear what you think. Love your channel and look forward to more videos soon. Courtney, I agree with you. I don't know if you were going to be trafficked or not, but it does feel like somebody in a fake cop car, because everything about that seems really weird. People can buy cop cars. I have an ex-boyfriend who bought an old cop car, and so all the stuff on the side, the writing and stuff on the side, and the lights were taken off, of course, but it still had the side mirrors, and people would still slow down when we were driving around because people would think they couldn't tell if it was a real cop car or not. So people can buy cop cars, retired cop cars, cop cars that aren't marked anymore. And I wonder if he bought siren lights. Like, I wonder if he bought lights found them somewhere and then attached them to the car. Like, we've seen, like, that's totally possible. The reason I think that, the weirdest part about this is that he said, "Why did you pull over?" No cop would ask you why you pulled over when they were following you with their lights on. No cop in the world. Traffic stop cops, there's such basic training for it. There is like protocol that they have to follow legally or they will get in massive trouble if they don't. This does not seem like a real interaction at all. There's no way a cop would pull you over and not ask for your license or registration, or at least your driver's license. I'm so confused. Why did you pull over? They wouldn't have said that. They would have come up to you and been like, "Hey, sorry, I meant to pull over." They probably wouldn't have said sorry, let's be honest, but they would have said like, "Hey, I was pulling over the guy behind you. You're free to go." They wouldn't have asked you why you pulled over. That's the dumbest question of all time. Cops would get so mad at you. You would get in trouble if you hadn't pulled over just to make sure. And you were pulling over, even if you weren't getting pulled over, you were pulling over because you were trying to let the cop go because his lights were on. That is so, okay, sorry, I'm harping on this, but my opinion is that that was not a cop. Especially with you saying that his eyes were bloodshot, like that makes me think he was intoxicated or on drugs or something. But on the other hand, if he did have nefarious intentions, why didn't he act on them either? Like pulling over two people and then, yeah, I don't know. This is very weird. For future reference, obviously it's way too late now. And I understand like you were young and there was no reason you would have thought this in the present moment. Like just to be clear, I'm not blaming you for this whatsoever. But for anybody else out there, if something like this happens to you, you can always call 911 or the police department while it's happening. If it's shady, if there's a person behind you that you're not positive is a cop or you think might be masquerading as a cop, you can call 911 in that moment and say, "Hey, there's a cop supposedly following me, but they look weird. I feel unsafe." Always say you feel unsafe. That helps a lot. And say like, "Hey, I'm just not positive that they are a real cop. Can you check really quick?" Because they can determine where the cop cars are. You can where you are and if there is actually a cop following you because they know where all the police cars are. If you don't do that, you can always turn on your lights to show the cop that you're going to pull over. You know, obviously don't drive too fast so that they know you're not trying to get away from them, and like put your blinker on and wait until you're in a parking lot with lots of lights, ideally somewhere where there's a worker close by so that there's a witness and also just a well-lit area and stuff to make you feel safer because I mean, cops are there supposedly to protect us. So if you explained that after you got pulled over, they should understand that. Again, as long as you're like putting on your blinker, putting on your directional and like not speeding off, to be clear that you know that you're working on pulling over, but that you just felt weird. The other thought I had, sorry to be a mom, but I'm always like this. Ask my friends. I'm always the mom. If you had thought of it after the fact, you could have called the police, the non-emergency police department number and reported this just to let them know. Like they probably wouldn't be able to do much about it, but if they were getting other calls like that, they might be able to track this down, or they could have told you, yeah, that was a real cop. You know what I mean? But you could have said like, "Hey," again, I don't blame you for not doing this at the time. But in hindsight, or if this ever happens to anybody else, like, "Hey, they didn't ask me for my license or registration, and I thought that was really weird." Like, just explaining the situation and stuff. So, okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to move on to the next story. We've been going over this one long enough. All right. This is story number 5. Hi, Hannah. My name is Josephine, and English is my second language, just so you know. I have a glitch in the Matrix story. It's not very scary, but I still think about it from time to time, now 10 years after it happened, so it definitely stuck with me. Here we go. After high school, I took a year off due to mental health reasons, and me and my dog moved from the city to my dad's, who basically lived in the countryside. I got to make the tiny guest house my room, and it was so nice being far away from stress and serious responsibilities. My dad had a key made for me and turned it into a master key, I think is what they're saying, because it opened both the main house's front and back door as well, and to my little house. How neat. I spent my days walking my dog in the beautiful forest, making art, just a self-care summer. That sounds magical. Anyway, one day my dad asks if I want to join him to go to the store, and I say yes. He asks me if I locked my room, aka the guest house, and I say yes, of course. I always locked it when I left, even when I just went up to the main house, just in case, because I had lots of valuables in there, computer, jewelry, etc. He points at my lanyard and says, "Where did you put your key? You only have the main house key with you." I say, "What do you mean? The key works for both the main house and the guest house." He says that it doesn't, but I insist, and we walk over to the guest house so I can show him. I put the keys in the keyhole, but it does not go in. I push and wiggle, but it does not work. I'm baffled. This is the key I have used for both the main house and the guest house for the whole summer. My dad gets mad at me and says I have not been locking that door, but I swear I did. I still to this day have no idea what happened. It was like the moment my dad said that key does not work, it magically stopped working. The fact that I would have somehow imagined locking the door all summer is almost more crazy to me. He still to this day says I must have been scatterbrained and lazy and wasn't locking the door, but I know I did, using the only key he had given me at the beginning of the summer. Thank you for reading, even if you don't end up using it in one of your videos. That's so weird. Huh. Okay, I'm going to let the comment section take this one. I feel like there has to be a logical explanation for this one, but I don't know what it is. I'm going to let people in the comments take this one and see if they have any suggestions for you, because that is very odd. I have no doubt that you were locking it with that key because you said specifically that you locked it because there was valuables in there. So there's no way that you just were misremembering that many times. All right, we're going to go right on to story 6. So this one starts, "Hi, Hannah. Just wanted to start by saying I love the channels. Your content is weirdly comforting considering the subject matter. I go by Kat, by the way. You don't have to keep me anonymous." Thank you, Kat. For some context, I'm a bat conservation research intern in the UK. That's so cool. At the time of this story and now, LMAO, I worked with a PhD student who I will call H. Her research focuses on bat usage of tunnels and what features of the tunnels are attractive to bats, etc., to keep their population grow. That's so cool. I love bats. Bats are the cutest things of all time. I also know what a lot of people, American friends, are thinking as I just did that rabies video. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and this person can correct me if I'm wrong, rabies is not as prevalent in the UK, I don't believe. I don't think in Australia or Europe it barely ever happens. Like, they don't even get the 1 or 2 cases that America gets every year. So I would be really interested to know, could you please tell me, could you please shoot me an email and let me know if you have to get the rabies vaccine, even though it's not that prevalent there? Like, do you, since you're working with bats and just wildlife in general, do you still have to get like all those vaccines? Because I know people here that work in a lab with bats, or they, in America, if you work in a lab with bats or just work with wildlife in general, you get pre-vaccinated for rabies so that if you do get bit, you're already protected. I think you still get treatment, but oh my God, I would be so interested to know that. I know that sounds so weird, but rabies is so fascinating to me. So please, if you're watching this, I would love an email to let me know. It doesn't have to be a scary story email, like just shoot me a random email. So, okay, anyway, sorry. Okay, I got excited. When we survey tunnels, she will do a hole count for any spaces that could be used as roosts by the bats, and I measure the length and height of the tunnel. We do this for every 15 steps for the length of the tunnel, survey the exit, and then walk back through to go back to the van. We survey the entrance at the start. Additionally, there are 3 audio detectors that H will put in the tunnels a week before we do our full survey to measure bat activity. There is one at each entrance and one in the middle. We collect them during our final survey. This will be important for later. This tunnel has been dubbed by us at our initial inspection as Creepy Tunnel. It was extra flooded with water pouring out of the ceiling, had iron bars on either entrance, and a bunch of creepy dolls throughout. What? There was just dolls in there? I'll attach some pictures of them for your enjoyment. How did I miss this? There's a picture on this one? Okay, hold on. Okay, sorry. I just looked through the email and I found this person's email, but I think they forgot to attach the pictures. I really want to see the creepy dolls in the tunnel. Kat, if you're watching this, if you could send them to me, I will include them in the next video, like at the intro. But I'm sure you just forgot. No worries. But I really want to see. I want to see the tunnels. Okay. It was also a twin tunnel, meaning there is a tunnel next door. It had a wall collapse between the two, but the gap between them was quite large, so you couldn't really see across to the other side because it got dark very quickly. For my science nerds in the community, I got to 0 lux within 30 foot, and the tunnel was 600 to 650 feet long. We didn't get light again until we were right next to the exit because it's curved. So we were already on edge entering the tunnel. To enter the tunnel, we had to climb through an iron fence in a rock just next to it and then balance on a rock on the other side, then hop across these big ass rocks until it was solid enough to walk on. We had to hopscotch to start because for the first 100 feet, the tunnel is flooded to just below the knees and my wellies, thank God. Okay, UK people, I don't know what a well... I don't know what that is. I'm assuming that means your undergarments. And the floor was like quicksand. The doll by this entrance had moved from its original spot, which freaked us both out even more. Inevitably, we got in a groove and managed to ignore our surroundings until we saw the doll's head in the middle of the tunnel. This again freaked us out because 3/4 of the way through was the part where water was pouring from the ceiling, so you couldn't hear shit. And it was just after the massive hole between the two tunnels. We got the middle detector and kept grinding to where we could see light. Only way out is through kind of mindset, you know? We were just by the turn to the exit. I was up against the wall getting the width measurement while H stood next to me, counting the holes on the opposite side of the wall, but just near enough to the middle that she could actually see outside. I was in a position where I could only see a tiny sliver of it. She was making a joke about us finally seeing the light when we heard a group of people coming closer. 2 men and a woman were speaking, but it sounded like quite a few sets of footsteps. We naturally quiet down because we're 2 women in the middle of the creepiest tunnel in the UK, closed in with iron bars, so you know, kinda scary already. H walked a bit forward and got the last detector, but I stayed where I was because, to be honest, I froze. H rushed back to be near me again as the people continued to get closer. She usually teases me for freaking out in these situations, but I could tell she was scared, which only scared me more, to be honest. She tried to play it off by asking me to put the detector in her backpack when we heard footsteps sloshing in the water by the outside of the bars. When I tell you my whole body became icy, I just could tell this wasn't okay. I rushed to zip her bag closed and turn my flashlight off. I saw H's back fully tense and look at the entrance with wide eyes. Out of nowhere, this banging sound started, like very hard banging on it. We just rose and stared at each other like, WTF. She swore to me that all she saw in that moment was someone smacking a stick against one of the bars from above the tunnel. Once the shock of what was happening wore off, and I know you might shout at us for this, but honestly, when I tell you scientists go through the wildest shit for their data, this is it. I whispered to her, we have permission from the National Rail, the people that manage the tunnel, to be here, and they told the landowner we'd be here. We're okay. This didn't comfort her, and knowing what I know now about this situation, I don't blame her. She just started to nod at me when we heard the most blood-curdling, loudest fucking scream. I'm being so real when I tell you it sounded like a skinwalker or something. I honestly almost started crying from sheer fear for my life. It echoed through the whole tunnel and back. Neither of us even agreed to run. We just did. We started fucking hightailing it out of there. Let me remind you, we turned our torches off and they stayed off. We were running through this tunnel in pitch black darkness, and I swear I heard footsteps in the water behind us, but I couldn't see anything. Wrestling to get through those iron bars again was one of the tense moments, I'm just gonna say that, of my life. I just kept envisioning someone grabbing my leg or something, but we managed to get ourselves and all of our shit through in one piece. Well, time for the piece of information I withheld because I didn't know it until we had ran across an open field back to our van. Oh, I'm scared. In the sister tunnel next door was an actively used homeless camp. You know, the tunnel with open access to ours. I had been presuming it was the landowner misunderstanding who we were and trying to scare us off, thinking we were some group of teens or something. But H told me that when she had gone down a week prior to set the detectors up, she had walked through there and seen evidence of it being used very recently. Food wrappers with expiry dates that hadn't passed, blankets, burnt woods, and needles. Please understand I am not trying to paint a bad image of the homeless or drug users in this. I have all the love and respect for them. But the idea that we had been in a tunnel for an hour and a half in pitch black, surveying and chatting and going about our normal job, knowing that the people who threatened us like that could have popped out of that hole at any moment and done who knows what to us, always chills me to the core. It remains one of the scariest moments of my life still. Naturally, we hightailed it out of there, and H contacted her PhD manager and National Rail, informing them that we will no longer be surveying that tunnel or using it for future research. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, even if it doesn't get featured in a video. Once again, love the content. Keep doing you, hun. Kat. Thank you so much, Kat. That went in a weird direction. I appreciate what you said about people, you know, the unhomed. Like, I know that doesn't mean that like they're all predators or evil. And I know that's not what you were saying, as you said in your thing, but I just want to say that your fear was completely valid regardless. It would have been nice if you had known they were there and if they were just minding their own business and living life. Like, obviously you wouldn't have bothered them, but you hearing footsteps and then one of them banging on the bars and then the blood curdling scream, that sounds way more like somebody. I'm not saying the whole group of the people that were living in that tunnel, but somebody was trying to scare you. Like, somebody knew that you were over there and they were either like threatening, making threats, or trying deliberately to scare you. And it worked, obviously, as it would for most people, which is just homeless or not, that's just not a very kind thing to do. And not that many people would do it unless they had nefarious intentions. So I feel like your fear is completely valid there. And I don't think that's saying anything about like the homeless population purposely do it. Like, I'm sure just like any population, 99.9% of them are just kind people just doing the best they can, you know, but I do think that sometimes in those groups of people, there are some bad seeds, just like there's bad seeds in any groups of people. And it was really cruel of them to scare you like that, because obviously somebody was trying to scare you on purpose. And that's just rude. Nobody likes that. So, okay, I think that's where we're going to end it for today. That was 6 stories. I hope y'all are liking the length. I feel like I can get more videos out if they're around like 35 to 45 minutes rather than like 1 hour videos. We could do, but you're going to get a lot less of them because it's simply harder to get done, of course, as you can imagine. So yeah, I love you guys so much. Thank you for all your stories. Please subscribe to the channel. I really want to get this channel to 10,000 subscribers. That is my goal right now. And you can do that by just liking the video or subscribing if you're not already. And thank you guys so much. I will see you on the next one. Okay, bye.